Have you ever wondered what led to some of the conveniences that we all enjoy today, like automated doors allowing us to walk into a building when our hands are full, or captions on a meeting or TV allowing us to follow along when someone speaks fast or quietly? The truth is that those are modern conveniences that we enjoy because people with disabilities fought for decades for the right to enter a public building, get information in a language they speak, and use a restroom at a restaurant or public building. Let's learn a bit more about these changes, how they help people with disabilities, and what it means for you. Hi, I'm Ada. I'm here to talk to you about the Americans with Disabilities Act and other laws that we call disability rights laws that impact the way we all live, work, and enjoy everything the city of Denver has to offer. But first, I think it's important for you to understand a bit more about the history of the disability justice movement so that you can better relate to people with disabilities you encounter at work and in your everyday life. 100 years ago, people with disabilities were thought to be inferior, and they faced terrible abuses in society. In 1927, in the case of Carrie Buck versus Bell, the United States Supreme Court, fearing that more people with disabilities would be born, ruled that it was legal and appropriate to sterilize people with disabilities living in state institutions. In the case, the Supreme Court referred to people with presumed intellectual, developmental disabilities as imbeciles and declared, "It is better for all the world if instead of waiting to execute degenerative offspring for their crimes or to let them starve for their imbecility, society can prevent those who are manifestly unfit from continuing their kind." These words and the meaning behind them are difficult to hear. Today, we do not accept treatment like that of anyone, including people with disabilities. But a lot happened in the last 100 years to get us where we are today. You have learned of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and the civil rights movement of the 1960s. During that time, Dr. King and thousands of supporters marched and demanded equality under the law. The civil rights movement included people of many races, national origins, religions, and with various disabilities, united to seek the ability to live, work, and enjoy life alongside their neighbors. The movement led to radical changes in our society that ultimately prompted legislative action. Though people with disabilities were not included in the initial legal protections afforded by the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the groundwork was laid. On July 26, 1990, President George H.W. Bush signed the Americans with Disabilities Act, called the ADA, into law. In his speech, President Bush shared his hope and belief that the ADA would end the unjustified segregation and exclusion of persons with disabilities from the mainstream of American life. The ADA is broad in its protections, prohibiting discrimination in employment, government services, transportation, and private businesses. It also requires reasonable accommodations if people with disabilities need a change in policy or physical feature in order to access a program or service. Over the years, the ADA has been strengthened by Congress, and it continues to be the most extensive disability rights legislation in America, even over 30 years later. Colorado also has its own law that offers many of the same protections as the Americans with Disabilities Act. It is referred to as the Colorado Anti-Discrimination Act, or CADA, and it provides civil rights protections for people in various protected classes, including disability. And for those of you working for the City and County of Denver, in 2020, Mayor Hancock reiterated the city's dedication to complying with the Americans with Disabilities Act when he signed Executive Order 147. Far from the reality that Carrie Buck faced in 1927, today people with disabilities can, and do, live in the community, have families, work, and contribute to society. Congress, our state, and even our mayor have committed to ensuring access and inclusion for all people with disabilities to live, work, and participate in life here in Denver. In fact, in Denver, we have an entire office dedicated to ensuring that these laws are known, understood, and followed. Let's hear more about it.
Hi, I'm Allison Butler, and I'm the director of Denver's Division of Disability Rights. The division is housed in the Mayor's Agency for Human Rights and Community Partnerships, or HRCP. I'd like to talk a little bit about the history of HRCP and our division. The story begins in 1947 when J. Quig Newton defeated Benjamin Stapleton in the Denver mayoral race. Benjamin Stapleton was a known member of the Ku Klux Klan, and despite significant controversy, as mayor, he appointed Klan members to multiple positions in Denver government, including the chief of police. When Quig Newton defeated Stapleton in the mayoral election, he set himself in opposition to this legacy of prejudice and formed the Committee on Human Relations with the purpose of studying the state of race relations in Denver. Not surprisingly, the committee found that prejudice was prevalent and systemic discrimination widespread in our city. The committee provided recommendations substantially similar to the provisions that would later be included in the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Over the years, the committee continued and expanded its work, with every mayor since Quig Newton relying on the committee for research and policy recommendations. Then, in 1980, the committee specifically began addressing the needs and priorities of the disability community. This was a full decade before the Americans with Disabilities Act was passed. Today, the Agency for Human Rights and Community Partnerships consists of 10 active commissions, 7 offices, 1 division, and over 40 employees. The agency has grown despite severe economic hardship, evidencing a profound affirmation from the city of its commitment to an equitable, inclusive, and diverse world-class city where everyone matters. The Division of Disability Rights works with city agencies and advises them on how to comply with and extend disability rights laws. We engage with the disability community directly, and we respond to concerns and complaints about accessibility of Denver city agencies and programs. Statistics show that 1 in 5 adults has a disability, and that the chance of having a disability gets higher as a person ages. We are here to help ensure the city fully recognizes and incorporates this integral part of our community. Speaking of our dedicated team, let's take a look. The Disability Rights Division has a group of professionals dedicated to addressing architectural accessibility. Led by Architectural Access Manager Ro-Ten Liang, this part of the team plays several key roles in helping Denver become and remain fully accessible to people with disabilities. The team works directly with all Denver city agencies to assess any architectural barriers that exist at city-owned or managed facilities and uses their expertise to help identify architectural fixes, called barrier removal. The team can assess issues prior to construction or renovation, provide technical assistance during construction or renovation, and inspect work once a project is completed to ensure full compliance with accessibility guidelines. Another important role of the Division of Disability Rights architectural team is to review building plans for compliance with accessibility guidelines. The plan reviewers are experts not only in local building codes, but specifically in the Americans with Disabilities Act accessibility guidelines. The building codes and accessibility guidelines do not always align, so the plan reviewers play a crucial role for construction projects in the city. All city construction projects and many private construction projects within the city and county of Denver must undergo this accessibility review to receive a permit to build. Finally, the architectural team in the Division of Disability Rights provides expert advice and resources to city agencies and private businesses looking to comply with accessibility guidelines and find ways to maximize full inclusion for all Denver residents and visitors. When an agency or private business is considering renovations or starting a new program, they can contact our architectural team to talk through accessibility issues and get customized resource documents to help them better understand the requirements. But that's only half our team. While architectural access is essential, having a beautiful ramp and push-button access to get into a building is futile if a person with a disability does not feel welcomed, is unable to communicate, or is excluded from participating in programs. That's where the other part of our team comes in. together with the division's director, the ADA coordinator, and the program access coordinator, help ensure that all programs and services offered by the City and County of Denver are delivered in a way that welcomes and supports participation by people with disabilities. We help city agencies understand and comply with accessibility requirements when posting information on their website or in newsletters. It's imperative that people who use screen readers or rely on Braille can access all the same information as everyone else. Also, we work to ensure that all city meetings and events are open and accessible to everyone. Whether that means having a sign language interpreter, having a dedicated seating section for people with mobility disabilities, or working with agencies to create appropriate policies that welcome service animals, the team is here to support city agencies so that their events can be accessed by every employee, resident, or visitor to the city. Additionally, much like the division's architectural team, the programmatic team loves working directly with city agencies when they have a question about how to be more inclusive and accepting of people with disabilities. This can be achieved through a quick call, verifying appropriate references for a constituent, to an agency-wide training on disability acceptance. The division is here to help the city earn its title as one of the nation's most accessible cities. One final role of the Division of Disability Rights programmatic team is to work directly with the community. This is a vital element of the work as it helps the division better understand the community's needs, concerns, and priorities. An important aspect of working with the community is the division's work with the Denver Commission for People with Disabilities. This volunteer, citizen-run commission is housed within HRCP and serves as the mayor's direct connection to Denver's disability community. The division serves as a liaison to the commission, helping the commission amplify their voice and directly impact city policies on disability. The Division of Disability Rights also works directly in the larger Denver community. Team members attend community events, hold quarterly community meetings, and they work with community members with disabilities when they have a complaint about the city's services or programs not being accessible. Whether you work in the mayor's office, run a business, or are a community member, the Division of Disability Rights team is here to support you and the goal of full inclusion for people with disabilities in Denver. What's the first step to full inclusion? Learning ways to truly accept people with disabilities as part of our community. Let's look at some real-life situations.
Okay, let me help you with this. Oh, so are you okay? Are you okay? Are you sure? Yeah. All right, I was trying to help.
That's tough. The person was just trying to help. But because they made assumptions about what would be helpful rather than asking first, things went wrong. It is always important to ask before you assume what another person needs. Not only is this respectful, but it can help avoid serious injuries. Let's look at a better way to handle this situation.
Good morning, sir. Can I help you with this?
No, thank you. But thank you for asking.
Of course, sir. Have a good one.
The other thing to keep in mind is that just because someone is doing something differently than you do, like Dan walking through the door, it doesn't mean that they can't do it at all. People with disabilities are very capable. Now let's look at how it can feel to encounter physical barriers.
Hello? It's Friday night. Ready to head out in town? Wait, hold on a second. Hey, hold on.
Hi, I needed to submit some paperwork.
Okay. Oh gosh, I am so sorry. Would you be able to reach that?
Looks like the character I was playing messed up. It doesn't seem like that customer was able to turn in his paperwork.
No, he wasn't. It seems they built a counter to ensure that all people could receive service, but then they made it difficult or impossible to use. Let's see if there is a better way.
Hello? Need to submit some paperwork.
Sure, let me see. Make sure everything's in order. Okay, yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
You too.
Yes, that was much better. I don't think the character meant to block access to anyone. He was just not thinking about it.
That's a great point, Rotan. Many times, we do things without fully thinking through the consequences. If we ride a scooter and leave it on the sidewalk, it may be annoying to everyone, but it can completely block access for a person using a wheelchair or walker. Or if we load or store boxes on an access ramp, again, we may be making it so a person can't get in. Even though these acts aren't done by people who are purposefully trying to keep people with disabilities out, the effect is the same, and it's discriminatory. So we all must be careful. Let's look at another situation.
Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. Excuse me? Go ahead and have a seat. What are you saying? I don't know anything about an interpreter. Do you all know anything about an interpreter?
Ada, that was really hard to watch.
Yes, that was very awkward.
Many of us take for granted that when we arrive at a meeting, we will be able to understand and participate. But for some people, they need adjustments to be able to understand and participate.
That's right, Rotan. And the ADA talks about this very thing. The ADA requires city agencies to provide what's called reasonable accommodations to allow a person with a disability to fully participate in any city government process, including meetings. This applies to employees and members of the public. In Denver, we are lucky to have our own city agency that can provide sign language interpreters, or CART, Communication Access Real-Time Translation, free of charge for any city meeting or event.
Right, the Deaf and Hard of Hearing Services Agency.
All you need to do is contact the office, tell them about your event and your needs a week in advance, and they will provide you and your coworkers or clients the reasonable accommodation they need.
Great. Can you show us how that situation would have been different if the city agency knew about the Deaf and Hard of Hearing Services office?
Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you. Have a seat right there. I wanted to thank you all for participating in the disability acceptance training today. We will be taking a break in about an hour, and we have a lot of wonderful things planned for today.
Oh, that went much better. It sounds like an easy process, and it ensured that Noah and everyone else could participate in the meeting. What's next?
Let's see how a meeting goes for a person who uses a service dog.
So, what do you think of the training so far?
It is absolutely fantastic, except some are not getting it.
What's wrong here, Ada? Here in Colorado, everyone loves dogs. Are you saying that we just can't pet every dog we encounter?
That is exactly what I'm saying. But not because we don't love dogs here in Colorado. In fact, we truly value dogs and the services they can provide to all of us, but particularly to people with disabilities. Both federal and state law allow people with disabilities to bring their dogs with them in public anywhere that they are allowed to go, provided their dog is trained to perform a service for them. When a dog is helping a person in this way, they are working, and the person with a disability is depending on them. So just as you wouldn't walk up and start a conversation and ask for help from a bus driver while they are driving, you shouldn't walk up and pet or snuggle with a dog while they are working. It distracts them and could cause an uncomfortable or even dangerous situation for the person with a disability.
Believe me, I get it. Dogs help some people with disabilities, just as a wheelchair helps some of my friends get around. None of us would appreciate it if someone walked up and started pushing them without asking.
Exactly, but it can feel confusing, and many people have questions about service dogs. Here's an example of how you can appropriately interact with a person who has a service dog.
What do you think of the training so far?
I think it's going great. How about for you?
Excuse me, do you mind if I pet your dog?
You sure can, but in just one moment, I will give him permission for him to come to you. Do not pet his head, and in a couple seconds, hands off, and then he comes right back to me.
Okay.
Thank you. Go say hi. Now, pop up.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Okay, that makes sense. And it still allows dog lovers to get in a little time with the dogs.
That's right. And next up, let's look at addressing people with disabilities.
Excuse me, Marcy, we're going to be starting food here shortly, and was curious if Stuart had any preferences for that. Right. say something wrong.
Wow is right. How awkward was that?
It's important to talk directly to the person with a disability, not their friend, coworker, or even their interpreter or attendant. Here's a better way.
Hey, Marcy, Stuart, sorry to interrupt. Just letting you know that we're starting food here shortly, and was just curious if you guys had any preferences or wanted anything special.
Oh, my goodness, everything. Just pick stuff and bring it in carts to me. I really appreciate that. I appreciate that. Seriously,
yeah.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you. Thank you.
Ah, much better. We should just talk to each person like an individual.
Exactly. We are all people, and we want to normalize disability.
Hi, I'm Joan LaBelle, and I'm the ADA Coordinator for Denver's Division of Disability Rights. Earlier, you learned about the history of the disability rights movement and how far we have come in the last 100 years. Likewise, the words we use to talk about or identify people with disabilities has also changed. The adage, "Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words can never hurt me," has proven to be false. Words do impact people. And sometimes, without realizing it, people say things in everyday conversations that can be hurtful to other people. For example, saying things like, "Well, that's crazy," "He was deaf and dumb," or "Here's a handicapped parking place." Words like these are quite offensive and dehumanizing to people with disabilities. And history has shown us that when an individual is considered inferior in some way, it can lead to terrible outcomes. So let's get back to treating everyone as human beings. One suggestion for positive interactions with people with disabilities, or anyone for that matter, is by thinking in people-first language. Here are some examples. Ada, do you want to help me here?
Love to.
Maybe because of the history of the way people with disabilities have been treated by society, it is very important to us to be viewed first and foremost as people.
I have heard that many words are no longer in use. Thank you for helping us understand why words like retarded, handicapped, and crippled are never appropriate anymore. Are there others?
I'm so glad you asked. Yes. People with disabilities don't want to be seen as victims or incapable. No matter a person's disability, they should enjoy the same respect as everyone else.
Yes, Joan. That's why we tell people to avoid saying things like suffers from, afflicted with, or confined to a wheelchair. We don't know somebody else's experience, and they may not feel like they are suffering. And people who use wheelchairs don't live in them. They use them to get around. And many of them can get around much faster than people who walk.
That's right. Don't underestimate any of us.
Also, it is best practice to identify those who don't have a disability as a person who doesn't have a disability, instead of using words like normal or healthy or whole. Again, people with disabilities aren't less than or inferior to people without disabilities, and the words you use should reinforce that.
Right. It helps normalize people with disabilities in our society. What about if a person has a specific type of disability? What's best practice, Ada?
The rule of thumb is to talk about the person first. Rather than saying a person is a quad or is a diabetic, instead, describe that the person has quadriplegia or the person has diabetes.
Correct. Many people choose not to be defined by their disability, but rather by their personhood.
What about people with other disabilities like mental health conditions or developmental or intellectual disabilities? What do you suggest, Joan?
Unfortunately, many people tend to stereotype people with mental health conditions and use unflattering terminology to describe situations. For example, have you ever heard someone say, "What a wacko," or "I had an insane day"?
Yes, and when people use terms like that, they mean it in a negative way, yet it is referring to a mental health condition. So try to avoid those terms in your everyday language. And when you are identifying someone with a mental health condition or an intellectual and developmental disability, then just say that. It seems we can completely agree that we should always use person-first language when identifying people with disabilities.
While that is what I prefer, nothing is ever that simple. People with disabilities are like all other humans. We are unique. Many people prefer person-first language. But some people choose to be identified with their disability, acknowledging that is who they are. Many people who are deaf choose to identify as a deaf person. Some in the blind community and autism community do the same. So your best bet is to ask a person how they would like to be identified.
That makes sense. We should all choose how we like to be identified.
Anything else we should discuss?
Just one more thing. Accessible parking spaces are required by law because without them, people with disabilities are not able to go to businesses, restaurants, or government offices. So don't use them if you don't need them.
Oh, good point. Because of my disability, I simply can't walk long distances. If there is no accessible parking available, I may have to turn around and go home, and that can be a problem when I need to be at work.
Okay, these things seem reasonable. Ask a person how they want to be identified. Don't use a parking space that you don't need because somebody else does need it. Is that about it?
Well, there will always be more. But the last thing I want to add is this. People often want to help or fix or cure people with disabilities. There can be an attitude of, I'll take care of you. While people can be very well-meaning, the truth is people with disabilities do not need to be taken care of any more or less than anyone else. People with disabilities participate in the same adventures as anyone else, including extreme sports, or they hold executive-level jobs. Remember, don't underestimate us. Whether you realize it or not, you interact with someone with a disability every day.
Thanks for reminding us of that, Joan. It's important. And thanks for talking with us today on tips for successful everyday interactions with all people, including those with disabilities.
At Denver's Division of Disability Rights, we believe that disability rights are human rights. We urge you to take a breath and remember that we are all human and we all deserve to be treated in a respectful way. Just as you wouldn't like to be called Bob when your name is Jennifer, people with disabilities don't like to be called handicapped. Even though you probably can't do a backflip on a 4-inch beam like Simone Biles, it doesn't mean you're not great at your job. So just because a person can't walk, hear, see, or communicate in the same way you might, it doesn't mean that they aren't capable and deserving of amazing things. This doesn't have to be hard, but if you ever want to talk about it, know that we are here, your Denver Disability Rights team. No one can achieve equity without the appropriate mindset and tools. I want to see what that would look like.